The story begins as the Demon Lord summons his glorious 4 elite generals of his army. The first to be summoned was his old mantra, the Inferno Assailant. The second is Gnome the Bastion. The third is Selphid. The Archmage of Storms. And the fourth is someone that the Demon Lord declares will become part of his army's strength and conviction. It is his newly chosen elite general that will help him conquer the world. He is a soul summoned from another world that will have powerful control over seas. The Demon Lord finishes summoning his elite general and announces the arrival of Dennosuke, the overseas manager.
Uchimura Dennosuke!
Hi?
A quick flashback shows that Dennosuke considered himself to just be an insignificant salaryman. He was filled with hope when he began his first job, but all that quickly went into the dumpster. Dennosuke started seeing that his colleagues were all getting promoted while all his work went unacknowledged. One day, this got even worse when he was given orders to transfer overseas. All his coworkers pitied him because he was sent to what is considered a graveyard for losers. Dennosuke tried to remain positive, but he quickly found that the power plant he was sent to was a mess, and the hierarchs didn't care. There was a shortage of equipment and manpower, but his boss told him that they couldn't waste more money. Dennosuke lost several of his workers, but he always believed that he could make things work, so he continued to work hard. The challenges were chipping away at his life, but eventually things improved and the workers came back. All his hard work was finally paying off as the power plant's success was beginning to skyrocket. But Dennosuke was horrified to hear that he was being transferred to another country. Again, he questioned what he was doing all this for, but this was when his life was ended by a scooter-kun. Back to the present, Dennosuke freaks out after realizing that he's now in another world. He's shocked to learn that someone knows his name, and the Demon Lord reveals that Dennosuke is one of the elite generals of his army. Now he is the great overseas manager. The Demon Lord has done a review of his entire work history, and he was very impressed by it. He saw how Dennosuke managed to rebuild the failing power plant and decided that he would be worthy of the Demon Lord's army. Of course, Dennosuke is confused and terrified because joining the Demon Lord's army is not a career path he ever considered. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder, this is more like falling off of it completely. The Demon Lord senses his hesitance, so he reveals all the great benefits that come with being one of his elite 4 generals. Dennosuke will receive the compensation and authority equivalent to the department managers of his old world. He will get to choose his subordinates, and he will even get his own office. The benefits are, of course, amazing, and Dennosuke really has no reason to complain. The Demon Lord even offers to send them back to his old world if he declines. Dennosuke is in awe of the Demon Lord now because he even respects worker rights. Dennosuke becomes depressed when he thinks about how poorly he was treated at his old job and says that he wasn't valued by his boss at all. He could never meet their expectations, and those who couldn't contribute to the organization were considered trash. Because of this, Dennosuke has come to think of himself as trash, so he tells the Demon Lord that he's not worthy of the Demon Lord's army. Dennosuke continues to put himself down, but the Demon Lord won't have any of it. He calls Dennosuke's old bosses fools and says that they only value what they see. They pay no attention to the work done behind the scenes. Having observed Dennosuke's work, the Demon Lord believes he can fully unleash the salaryman's potential. He says it's not up to Dennosuke to determine whether or not he is worthless, nor is it up to his old bosses. The Demon Lord says that it is he who will decide this because he's the one that needs Dennosuke. He then explains that the salaryman has 2 options: have his life ruined by working for fools, or serve the Demon Lord and aim for this guy. Dennosuke isn't sure about what to say. He's interrupted by Almandra. She has an objection, and she can't see how a weak human will be able to serve as one of the 4 elite generals. The others object as well,
私も反対です。
人間風情には土台無理かと。
この人たちの言うと
and Dennosuke agrees with them. The Demon Lord shows his great leadership as he takes their options into consideration, and Dennosuke is shocked when the Demon Lord decides to test him. Dennosuke desperately tries to explain that he has no powers, but the others are fired up by the idea. Almandra has heard that humans from other worlds have special powers, and she wants to see it. She tests Dennosuke with her most deadly blow, and he realizes that his death is inevitable. Luckily for him, the Demon Lord stops a crazy fire girl. She angrily wants to know why she was stopped, so the Demon Lord reveals that Dennosuke just fainted from shock. It's pretty clear that he's just an ordinary human, and the Demon Lord explains that Dennosuke doesn't have any powers. Of course, this makes the other's object even more, since an incompetent human will never be accepted by an army full of powerful monsters. There is a power struggle between demons and demi-humans of the army, and Dennosuke would get eaten alive. Noam blames the demons for the power struggle, but Old Mandra blames the demi-humans. There is a clear struggle among the ranks, but that is exactly why the Demon Lord wants Dennosuke to join them. He doesn't want Dennosuke for his power, he wants them for their resourcefulness. Just and Dennosuke regains consciousness while still thinking about how Almandra's kick will destroy him into smithereens. The Demon Lord says that Dennosuke doesn't have to worry. He doesn't want Dennosuke for any physical abilities, and he will give the Salaryman a fitting exam. This is still pretty terrifying as Dennosuke realizes that this is an otherworldly entrance exam. The Demon Lord goes into details and explains that his army is trying to make pacts with several tribes surrounding their land. Unfortunately, negotiations with one tribe in particular aren't going so well. That is why Dennosuke's exam will be to successfully make a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Dennosuke's great negotiation skills, he must gain the Minotaur's trust and welcome them into the demon army. Dennosuke is shocked by the sudden change in his life, and the Demon Lord tells him to ask Omandra if he has any questions. Unfortunately, Omandra doesn't like him very much, and she is sure that Dennosuke won't pass the exam. Of course, our boy is lacking in the confidence department, and simply considers himself to be a useless salaryman who can't use magic and has no special abilities. However, he has never worked for someone that actually needed him, so Dennosuke really wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations. Just then, they arrive at the room where the Minotaur chief is staying. Dennosuke is terrified by what the huge door means, and Omandra warns that Minotaurs are ferocious. She tells our boy that he needs to be cautious or he will be trampled to death and turned into a human carpet. Dennosuke tells himself to do his best, but that all falls apart when he sees how terrifying the Minotaur is. It truly is the embodiment of violence, and Dennosuke imagines himself getting crushed. Old Mandra decides to help out the poor salaryman and shows him how negotiations are done. She asked for the great and powerful Sir Terius to hear what she has to say, and then it took. He's relieved that she can act as a mediator. However, when Omandra suddenly begins screaming at Terius, his hopeful optimism is completely shattered. It's pretty clear that she's a terrible negotiator, and Terius just goes back in his room. Omandra reveals that negotiations with the Minotaurs were going well at first, but for some reason, Terius started refusing everything. Omandra kept trying to complete negotiations day after day, but Terius just kept saying nay over and over again. On top of that, he tried bringing in a bunch of trash to throw around his room. Terius makes a bunch of noise as he thrashes about in his room, and Omandra simply leaves the rest to Dennosuke. Our boy is terrified as the giant beast continues to thrash about, and he decides to go for a walk. He seriously doubts that he will even be able to talk to Darius, and he can even hear Omandra putting him down. After failing, Just and Dennosuke strangely find themselves in a bar. He asks for the usual and thinks about how it's impossible to negotiate with someone who doesn't want to. At that moment, Dennosuke realizes that he encountered a similar situation before. A client kept telling him no, and Dennosuke was ready to give up on the negotiation. However, once they established eye contact, they were able to understand each other. Dennosuke now has a newfound confidence, and it is sure that he can settle things. We then see that Old Mander's reporting back to the Demon Lord. She doubts that another worlder will be able to complete negotiations, but the Demon Lord gives Dennosuke some more time. Omandra goes to check on him, but she is shocked to find Dennosuke digging through the trash. Dennosuke explains that he wants to have a proper conversation with the Minotaur, but Omandra thinks it's impossible. The beast has a major attitude, and he has no interest in making a deal. She is shocked, however, when Dennosuke says that she's just giving up too early, and negotiations aren't going well because there must be a misunderstanding somewhere. The only way to reconcile things is to make eye contact with the other person while building a relationship of trust. Our boy confidently tells Amandra to watch him as he completes the negotiation, and she is done to see his transformation. The next day, Amandra barges into the room and is shocked to see that it's a complete mess. She fears that they had a battle, but then Asuki appears, and she blames them for making a mess. She wonders where Terius is, and Dennosuke reveals that he's currently making the pact with the Demon Lord. Amandra is completely confused, so Dennosuke clarifies that the Minotaurs and the demon army will finally be allies. Amandra refuses to believe that Dennosuke was able to complete the negotiations in just one night, especially because Terius has been so difficult this entire time. Dennosuke explains that you must know yourself so you can know your enemy, but she has no clue what he's talking about. He clarifies even further by pointing out how old Mandra thought that Terius was refusing negotiations. She thought he was because he just kept saying nay to everything. Dennosuke explains that the Minotaur actually thought the talks were going well. What helped Dennosuke figure out the problem was his experience from someone telling him no over and over again. No matter what Dennosuke tried, he couldn't convince this corporate boss to agree to the negotiations. The more he discussed details, the more emotional the guy became. It wasn't until Dennosuke was ready to give up that the guy decided to shake his hand. It turns out that the guy just liked to have lively conversations and wanted to hear as much detail as he could. In some countries and cultures, being emotional and passionate is good. That is where the misunderstanding came from. When Dennosuke looked Terius in the eyes and really talked it out, he found out everything. Terius was just being passionate, but Amanda took it as him wanting to fight. That is why he got even more upset when she threatened to end the negotiations because of his behavior. Also, it's common courtesy in the Minotaur tribe to bring hay into the room when staying over. The kind Minotaurs do this to make sure they don't break the house bed since they have such big bodies. His hay was mistaken for garbage, so Terius had to sleep on the floor, and he was sleep deprived. He was really frustrated, so he couldn't convey his feelings in a way that Amandra understands. Amandra realizes that she failed to make an effort to understand Terius, but Terius participates in the blame as well. The two apologize to each other, and Terius thanks Dennosuke for everything. As they say goodbye, the Demon Lord explains that the successful negotiation was thanks to Dennosuke's talent, his ability to pick up on things that people normally wouldn't. The Demon Lord says that Dennosuke passed the test and welcomes him as a new member of the 4 elite generals. Old Mander no longer doubts the Salaryman, and the Demon Lord tells him to hold out his arm. The Demon Lord gives him a bracelet and says that it will serve as proof that he is one of the great generals. The Demon Lord has full trust in him and tells Dennosuke to do what he thinks is best and to do what he believes is right. After Dennosuke thanks the Demon Lord, Amandra raises her arm to him. She's furious when he doesn't know what she's doing, so she tells him to raise his arm back. Dennosuke does, and the two formally say their titles to each other. Amandra explains that this is how her clan welcomes new friends, but she goes back to her old self as she tells them that she has some fully acknowledged him yet. The two run off together, and the Demon Lord thinks about how a group that complements each other will also grow stronger together. Unfortunately, his army is still immature and incomplete. However, Dennosuke will be their light, and his brightness will lead the army so they can truly shine later. Dennosuke still can't believe that he was brought to a new world, but he's even more amazed to really have his own office. He was brought to a small country, but the chain of command and the Demon Lord's army are organized well. Dennosuke has a lot of anxiety about his situation, but the Demon Lord was the only one who's actually ever acknowledged him. Because of this, Dennosuke has no choice but to do his best. In an effort to initiate his day with a breath of fresh air, he is confronted with a swarm of frightened bats. Dennosuke plans to take his new job very seriously, so this means behaving with proper etiquette. To accomplish this, he will have to formally introduce himself to the other generals. Selphid is first on the list, but Dennosuke is told that Selphid has been absent for quite some time now. Her assistant Belinda says she will pass the message along and shuts the door, and our boy Dennosuke refuses to be discouraged, so he moves on to the next general, but old Mandra interrupts him. The Demon Lord has summoned him because there's a new work order. This time, it's a merger negotiation with the Ogre tribe. The Demon Lord's army is an emerging force, so in order for them to stand equal to the greater powers, they need to cooperate with the Demi humans. Amongst the Demi many humans in the area, the Ogre tribe is especially influential. They have a military force that is just as powerful as the Demon Lords, and it acts as a leader to the surrounding races. However, because of this, they are wary of the Demon Lord's army. An alliance would be very beneficial for the Demon Lord, but the ogres could become troublesome enemies as well. The Demon Lord wants Dennosuke to really understand, so he compares it to a merger negotiation with the competing business. Before Dennosuke's rival, there was no being suited for this task because of how important it is. However, the Demon Lord is certain that Dennosuke is capable of this task. He instructs the Salaryman to demonstrate his ability to the fullest so he can convince the ogres. Dennosuke is pleased when Omandra offers to escort him, but she says it's only because she worries when she's not with him. Before they leave, Dennosuke would like to meet with Gnome, the other general. Gnome leads the demi-human forces in the Demon Lord's army, and she might have valuable information because the ogres are also demi-humans. Omandra refuses to tag along, and so she needs to make the preparations for their travels anyway. Outside, Dennosuke is amazed when he sees some training going on. Gnome compliments her troops on the rapid improvement, and she gives them a break. Dennosuke can't believe how organized the demi-humans are, and he can clearly see how their morale is very high. Gnome being able to command such a large group is also very impressive. Dennosuke finally gets to introduce himself, and he explains that the ogre tribe will be his next target. Gnome explains that their chief is a really tough opponent because of his bravery and boldness. He is seen as a ruthless dictator, but Gnome says that Dennosuke will soon see for himself. Gnome takes a very serious tone, and she tells Dennosuke to get something out of her face, and her subordinates become uneasy when a demon is nearby. Dennosuke has no clue what she's talking about and is shocked to find that a very angry old man is behind him. She says that she's worried about him, but quickly corrects herself to say that his slow butt was taking too long. Gnome tells Dennosuke to get that thing out of her face again, but this just makes the girls argue. Later, Dennosuke and Omandra are told to wait for the ogre chief's permission outside their gate. Tensions are high, and Dennosuke realizes that this is just like his previous job. It's evident that the negotiation process has already commenced prior to reaching the table. Dennosuke explains to Omandra that throwing off the other party by making them wait is a common negotiation tactic. It's of utmost importance to remain calm, but Omandra is tired of being toyed with. Jest and the two are allowed to enter, and Omandra tells the Salaryman to not let his guard down. The Yogurts are an exceptional race, and their power is comparable to that of the demon army. Omandra reminds him that their biggest concern will be the chief himself, named Ogre. Dennosuke can only wonder what kind of beast the chief is as they enter his room. Ogre is fearsome looking, and he interrupts old Mandra's introduction. The rude ogre calls her a wench and tells her to stop yapping so much. He declares that as long as he lives, he won't allow her to speak, respond, move, or do anything at all. Omandra silences herself, and Dennosuke is shocked to see his short-tempered friend holding herself back. Omandra is the next to be shocked, however, as Agori assumes that they are here to surrender to his army. The cold-blooded chief accepts their surrender, but only if they bring him the Demon Lord's head. Oh man, just ready to go off on this guy. But Dennosuke just manages to calm her down. Ogre continues with his insulting suggestions, but luckily Dennosuke steps forward. He calmly thanks Ogre and says that they will take some time to think about the offer. Outside, Omandra lets out her anger and cusses out the chief. Dennosuke tries to calm her down, and he explains that this is what Ogre wants. His aim is to make them angry, so the negotiations fall apart. Omandra is shocked by Dennosuke's foresight, and he explains that Agare has no intention of negotiating. He also wants to avoid conflict, so he says antagonizing things. That way, if the deal falls through, then it won't be his fault. He will be able to blame the negotiators that the Demon Lord sent and not take any blame himself. Dennosuke reveals that he's just as upset after hearing how insulting Oguru was to their army, but he knows that it would put the Demon Lord at a disadvantage if he showed his frustration. If the two of them mess up now, then the Overs could use it as an excuse to ally with other nations. Potentially, they could even attack the demon army. It's clear that there's no room for negotiations right now, and trying to force it might harm the relationship. Omandra apologizes for losing her cool, but Dennosuke says that he's glad she was there. If she wasn't, then he would have been the one to rage out. Unfortunately, they still don't know what to do about Oguru's unwillingness to negotiate, and the girl from earlier introduces herself as a Gray's daughter named Oyulu. Omandra assumes that she's there to fight, but Oyulu reveals that she actually wants to drag her father down from his throne. Ayulu takes them to a food cellar and reveals that the ogre tribe has run into financial problems. Their tribe no longer has the influence they once had, and some other people are even struggling to find food. Omandra shocked to see the true genius of our boy, as he already had an idea that this was happening. He realizes something was off when he saw that the guard's armor seemed dilapidated and the castle was dim and lifeless. This is something he saw in his old world when large companies were on the decline. The top-down management style done by one person works well because the chain of command is simple. However, once it breaks down, it's hard to fix. Lulu acknowledges that that is exactly what's happening. The only way to rebuild the failing tribe is to rely on the demon army, but Ogre refuses to listen. To make things even worse, the chief is very ill. He tries to put on a strong front, but he is no longer in his prime. Yululu knows that things would get much worse if her father passes, so she desperately wants something to be done. Dennosuke, seemingly a different man now, explains that while Lululu has good intentions, her actions are flawed, he says that a member of an organization should not easily talk about internal affairs. Dennosuke wants her to be more careful, and Ayulu thanks him for worrying about her. Of course, Omandra doesn't like this little conversation, and Ayulu says that she only told Dennosuke because she could tell he is trustworthy. Ayulu decides to just go for it, so she asks Dennosuke to marry her and become the new chief of the ogre tribe. This makes Omandra even more upset, but Ayulu can tell that Dennosuke is the only one who can save their tribe. Everyone in the clan is hard-headed and influenced by her father. Their marriage is the only solution, but Omandra says that they will take some time to think about it. Back home, Dennosuke thinks about how his second job is already a mess, and he finds himself back at the bar. This time Omandra is there, and she argues with everyone about who the strongest wild animal is. She thinks it's the lion, but the bartender says it's the gorilla. The two go back and forth about which is cooler, and Omandra says that a group of lions being called a pride is the coolest. The words group and pride seem to give Dennosuke an idea, and he finds himself back in the castle. Being in the bar has given him confidence once again, and he declares that it's time to settle the account. The next morning, Omandra's pleased to hear that our boy has come up with a solution. She gets ready to head back to the ogre tribe, but Dennosuke reveals that they will be going somewhere else. If all goes according to his plan, the ogre chief himself will be the one to set up the negotiation. 1 week later, Ogre surprisingly calls our two heroes to meet with him. Dennosuke pretends to be clueless, but Ogre tells him to drop the act. He demands to know why the other tribes just joined the demon army, and our boy lets out a sly smile. It turns out that Dennosuke's plan was to simply recruit the other races first, just as he thought. The other tribes were in trouble as well because they used to rely on the ogre tribe before they became weak. Because of this, Dennosuke decided to speak with all the regions surrounding the ogre tribe. This isn't Dennosuke's first time doing something like this either. In his previous world, he discovered that foolishly approaching a large company through the front gate would result in expulsion. Instead, he approached small and medium companies first. He gave them his sales pitch and got them to buy his products. After finding success there, the big companies finally began to buy themselves. This is because they didn't want the small companies to have new products while they carried the old ones. Dennosuke knew that getting the surrounding tribes to join the demon army would force the prideful ogre to do something. The first part of Dennosuke's plan is a complete success, and now it's time to close the deal. The chief expresses his frustration as he declares that this area is ruled by the ogre tribe. He's utterly enthralled, and that's precisely what Dennosuke desired. Our guru is becoming more emotional and less logical. Dennosuke explains that negotiations are lost by those who lose their cool first. Dennosuke keeps his cool and explains that the Demon Lord wasn't the only one involved in the other tribe's recruitment. It was also the ogre tribe. Ogre is furious as he did no such thing. But then Asuka reveals that it was actually thanks to Ayulu. She took it upon herself to arrange negotiations with the surrounding tribes. Ogre can't understand, so Lulu explains that their top priority should be the lives and the future of the demi-humans. The only way out of all their problems is to rely on the demon army's help. Ogre tries to continue his stubborn ways, but Ayulu says that she has always looked up to him. Unfortunately, the ogre chief, who was once invincible, is now old and ill, so now they must accept help from the demon lord. Dennosuke can tell that he's still hesitant, So he says that instead of having the ogre be the Demon Lord's subordinate, they can just form an alliance. The two are practically the same thing because the Demon Lord is a fair leader, but Dennosuke knows that the wording is important to the prideful ogre. Dennosuke's plan has gone perfectly, so Ogre says he will take some time to consider their offer. Omandra wonders if this is really a good thing, but Dennosuke can tell that Agare already knows his answer. He just needs the time to say it. Everyone leaves, and Agare is proud to see how much his daughter has grown. A few days later, Omandra informs Dennosuke that Agare has asked to speak with her so they can finalize the agreement. She sees that Dennosuke is overwhelmed, and he explains that the Demon Lord has issued another order. He wants Dennosuke to select a direct underling, but the Salaryman doesn't know who to choose. He can't tell much from the resumes, so Mandra suggests that he just trust his intuition. He wishes he could just pickle Mandra and her. She officially says that they just met and Olulu arrives as a representative of the Ogre tribe, and she thanks Inosuke for helping the two tribes form an alliance. Since then, her father has even been delegating work to the most capable people in their tribe. The Ogre tribe is doing much better now, and she offers to repay Dennosuke any way she can. Dennosuke comes up with a brilliant idea to have her work for him, but this upsets Old Mandra greatly. Oh, Lulu happily agrees, but this makes Old Mandra call Dennosuke her rival, and she says that she has no intention of being buddy-buddy with him. Dennosuke is at least pleased to see that the Demon Lord's army has expanded a great deal after all his work. But it's not all good. With every big return, there's always a risk that comes with it. Later, Lulu tells Dennosuke that she already finished the first assignment he gave her. She finished negotiations with some Were-Bear tribe, and she was the strategy that Dennosuke taught her. Just then, she reveals that he's going to be given a Distinguished Service Award for the alliance with the Ogre tribe. It's a big deal, and there will even be an award ceremony. Dennosuke has never received an award before, and he imagines how nice it would be. His delusional dreams are interrupted by Omandra, who has brought lunch. The soup isn't so great, because it's made of some crop called gim that Dennosuke doesn't like very much. Thanks to Lulu taking over some of his work, Dennosuke has had more time to learn about this new world. This watery, thin porridge that isn't very appetizing to him is actually the demon army's staple food. Dennosuke quietly wishes that he could eat some meat for once, and no man just somehow hears him. She declares that it's time to go hunting, but Dennosuke is shocked that they will be getting the meat he wanted themselves in the forest. Dennosuke is horrified about trying to find a magical beast. Omandra has received reports about beasts being in this area and about 5 orcs who live here being eaten. Clearly Dennosuke is not prepared for this, but Omandra reminds him about the law of nature in this world. That is that the weak are simply eaten. Normally the orcs in the area are able to handle things on their own, but the two of them have to help now because the beast is too strong. Dennosuke reminds himself that the demons eat the water porridge because they can't afford food. That, along with having to deal with magical beasts, makes it clear that this world has more problems than he expected. Just and Omandra find the valuable mushrooms that the orcs were picking when they were attacked. Her plan is to wait by them until the beast appears, but they don't have to wait long. The hell hog shows up, and Dennosuke is terrified of the creepy sounds it makes. Omandra explains that it's a warning, and she tells her boy to stay back. Omandra lands a devastating kick on the beast, and Dennosuke can tell that she is an experienced fighter. Enraged, the beast unleashes a torrent of rocks on Omandra, shocking Dennosuke with its sheer power. He acknowledges that Omandra is incredible herself for dodging the beast's attack, but he knows that she's lacking something very important. Her attacking style would be great in a dungeon raid, but their goal right now is to hunt for food. This thing she is lacking is the ability to inflict mortal wounds. This boar is a killing machine gene, naturally armed with tough horns, sharp claws, and powerful fangs. Humanoids, however, don't have any of that and are weak in comparison. Their capacity for killing is very low, which is why they created all sorts of weapons. They look beyond themselves for the killing capacity they lacked. He was assured that Omandra must have realized this as well, so he can't understand why she didn't bring a weapon. Luckily, Omandra realizes that her brute force isn't working, and it's time to actually start trying. Dennosuke's is amazing when Omandra strengthens her body and she transforms. She explains that the spell she just used takes a while to wear off, so she doesn't like using it too much. It can't be helped, so she tells the beast to come at her. The board accomplishes this task, but Dennosuke is shocked when she halts it. She knows that she has to be careful, otherwise, she might cut its stomach open, leaving it inedible. Because of this, she does some crazy move where she snaps its neck while holding it in the air. The board is completely defeated, and Dennosuke is stunned to see what demons can really do. Omandra declares that it's time to feast, but Dennosuke doesn't have much of an appetite after what he just saw. Later, the orcs thank Omandra, and she tells them that they will all feast together. Dennosuke can't believe that they're all so happy to eat a beast kind of similar to them, and one of the orcs has already started breaking the beast down. Dennosuke is impressed that Omandra can cook too, and she plans to show him the nation's best meat dish. All Dennosuke has eaten since coming to this world has been gimbap, so he can't wait to eat the meat. That Damon girl explains that she will be cooking it on an open flame, so Dennosuke imagines her using a grill. This isn't what she had in mind at all, however. Actually just cooks it with the fireball. It doesn't look appetizing at all, and to Dennosuke, it looks more like a mysterious burnt object. Amanda insists that he give it a try, and Dennosuke is horrified by how terrible it tastes. The bitterness and harshness spread throughout his mouth the moment he bit into it. The oily meat juices flowed out and clung to the inside of his mouth. The poor cooking technique is to blame, and Dennosuke wasn't prepared for this amount of isekai culture shock. Dennosuke finds an oven they can use, but Omandra says there isn't nearly enough salt to improve the flavor of the meat. Dennosuke comes up with a great idea and tells everyone to leave the cooking to him. He explains that he won't need too much salt, and all he needs are some edible mushrooms. A while later, Dennosuke reveals that his grilled borscht with mushrooms is finally done. Amanda is the first to test it, and it's so effective that it tears apart all her clothes. Thankfully, it doesn't have the same effect on the Yorks, but they agree that it's delicious. They can never get the borscht to be this perfect, so Dennosuke teaches them. He explains that boar meat is gamey, so it's important to soak it in water and wash away the blood. It has a lot of fat as well, so he cooked it slowly and away from the flame to avoid burning and to remove the excess fat. He can reduce the gaminess in the soup even more by shortening the cooking time. Amanda wonders if being such a good cook is something a demon general should be proud of, but Dennosuke thinks it is. It is said that people can judge how rich or poor a nation is by looking at its eating habits. Having lots of resources makes it easy to use trial and error, and naturally, that leads to building knowledge. Amanda's insulted. He's saying that their nation lacks knowledge because they are poor. However, she says he is right. Compared to the surrounding powers, their nation is small and weak, so much so that their people don't have enough to eat. Omandra is determined to change that, however, as that is the role of the elite generals. Dennosuke concurs with her, and Omandra is astounded that he has prompted her to contemplate all of this based on a single meal. They prepare to head home in the dark, and Omandra shows them the light source they will be using. She thinks that magic is inaccessible to demihumans and usable only by demons. Dennosuke remembers how the demihumans were training in combat and realizes that it was because they can't use magic. Dennosuke wonders if Sylphid is a demon or demihuman, but Omandra doesn't actually know. She is known as the Archmage of Storms, however. Omandra assumes that she has to be a demon. For some reason, Sylphid never attends a leap for meetings, and she's the only one who joins them remotely. As they head home, Dennosuke's impressed by her magic, but he remembers how she said it was inconvenient. She changes her body using magic, but the time to return to normal is a drawback. The genius Dennosuke explains that it would be more efficient to equip herself with weapons right from the start. Similar to cooking, starting an oven ahead of time will help keep food from burning. Dennosuke adds that it would also be more sensible to switch out her light and revealing clothing for more protective armor. This proves to be the wrong stuff to say, however, as Omandra gets very serious. Dennosuke may be right, but she is deeply offended. Without explanation, she says that Dennosuke will stay here and return to the demon's castle in the morning with an orc escort. Dennosuke can't understand why, but she simply says that after earning some of her trust, he just ended up disappointing her like she expected. At first, Dennosuke really is just a human from another world. After all, his efficient thinking is simply incompatible with demons. Omandra takes off, but our boys still can't understand what he did wrong. Dennosuke determines that he needs to run after her so he can apologize. Unfortunately, there are some pretty terrifying noises coming from the forest, so he decides to run for his life instead. The next day, the Demon Lord commenced Dennosuke and a job well done. He wonders why his two generals return separately, and Dennosuke cries out that he's not fit to be an elite general. He apologizes profusely and says that an elite general who disrupts relationships between colleagues is unfit to serve. He wants to take full responsibility and plans to do so by leaving his post. The Demon Lord isn't bothered, however, and simply tells Dennosuke to make things right with the demon girl. Outside, Dennosuke tries to think about what he did wrong. His only clue is that she mentioned something about how efficient thinking is incompatible with demons. So far, Dennosuke has seen two species in this world, demons and demihumans. Before coming here, Dennosuke had the impression that demons were intellectual and the demihumans, like orcs, were wild. However, in this world, things are reversed. This is evident by how demons expose more skin and are far more wild. Attire reflects a lot of things like era, culture, and even a way of thinking. Dennosuke wonders what her thinking process is and links it back to the pride she had towards her magic. Dennosuke desperately searches a history book for the answer and finds it. It turns out that for demons, a beautifully trained body is a source of pride. This is because a strong body is required to increase one's magic power. The stronger they get, the more magic power they have. Dennosuke realizes that this is why demons wear skimpy clothes. It's to show off their magic power and their pride. He is horrified when he realizes where he went wrong. By telling her to cover up with some more armor, he was actually rejecting who she is as a demon. It was a total misunderstanding of culture, and it's something he should have remembered from dealing with Terius. Dennosuke has realized the truth of this world, but he has no clue how he will reconcile things with Alamandra. Elsewhere, Lulu is startled by something, and she fears that it's an evil god, but it's actually just a very upset old Amandra. Amandra cries out that Dennosuke hates her, and she doesn't know what to do. She cries in Alulu's arms and says that Dennosuke didn't compliment her shredded physique. Alulu calms her down and explains that Dennosuke's values are just different from theirs. He doesn't think that exposing skin is a good thing, but Amandra says that's ridiculous. It makes her wonder what he thinks of her, and Alulu says he must think that she's addicted to developing plot. Amanda is shocked, and she realizes that all the ways she has tried to show off so far were actually working against her. She can't handle having made such a big mistake, and she turns to Yululu for advice. Yululu explains that Dennosuke actually told her something the day she started working for him. He said that he would like her to conduct herself freely and not fear mistakes. She had a tendency to worry too much, so he just wanted her to work freely and talk to him about anything. This made her realize that she could trust him, and so can Amandra. Back at the mysterious bar, Dennosuke enjoys a perfect meal. He can't get enough, and the chef explains that it's homemade. Dennosuke has never seen him smile before, but this gives him an idea. Clicking his head, he has decided that there's no need to overthink it. It's important to understand the other person's culture, but there is something else that's more essential. Our two heroes rush to find each other, and they finally do. Dennosuke has realized that the single most important thing is to honestly convey his feelings. Dennosuke doesn't waste any time and yells that he thinks Amandra's body is amazing. At the same time, Amandra screams that she's not addicted to developing plot, and she just wanted to be complimented. With that cleared up, Dennosuke says that he always wanted to compliment her physique, but he has a limited vocabulary. Dennosuke apologizes for insulting her culture, and Amandra is impressed that he did some research. She is touched, and she apologizes for trying to force her standards on him. The two have learned a lot about each other, and Dennosuke wonders if it would make them strong partners. Amanda is flustered and believes he might be using a deceptive method to confess his feelings to her. Dennosuke is just glad to have things cleared up so they can continue working together. Later at the awards ceremony, the Demon Lord credited Dennosuke, the overseas manager, for making his army much stronger with all the alliances. It's only been a short time, but Dennosuke has accomplished so much as recognition of his success that the Woman Lord grants him a magic stone. Dennosuke is honored, but he explains that he could not have achieved all the success alone. Amandra then screams in shock as he turns to her, and Dennosuke declares that the jewel belongs to the both of them. He wonders if she will accept it, but Amandra shockingly calls him an idiot. Alulu is disappointed by what she's watching, as it's clear that Dennosuke is unaware. To the demons, a man giving a woman a magic stone is a marriage proposal. Amandra continues to rage out as she wishes that Dennosuke would be more romantic with this moment. Dennosuke, on the other hand, is completely clueless. Elsewhere, a mysterious person watches them. For some reason, she seems glad to see that Dennosuke has ingratiated himself with the Demon Lord's army despite his incompetence. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting, and please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.
Take you